right, good morning, everybody. It's 9:10 exactly, so I'm going to get started. Happy Friday. I'm glad you made it all the way to the end of the second week. So we are going to wrap up our week, or our week, in other words. And so this week had been a discussion on introduction to R. The lecture on Monday, the lecture on Wednesday, the lecture today are all around R, and so were the two tutorials. And so we'll wrap up now this discussion that was dedicated just for R, but we will make use of R as we go along through the semester. And I hope you have been picking up things. And for those of you, especially that where this is a new language, I hope you have caught up, but there will be more and more opportunities. I know you are joining, a few of you are joining now, and before we get started, we always do a warm-up question. I'm going to take excuse for the fact that it is a Friday today, so I'm going to ask you a warm-up question that is not going to make you think like you did last time, trying to give a feedback on how things are going, how the video and audio and everything else is going. That requires a little bit of thinking, and you have time. Now, I hope it won't be requiring a lot, much thinking, but maybe a bit of a time. So on one of the lectures we had the first week, I asked you about your favorite take-inspired word, and word that has become now part of our vocabulary. And there were very interesting things that came out, and I think it was fun. But I want to ask you today what your all-time favorite movie is that is take-inspired. It could be technology, really, or it could be science. But if I say just all-time favorite movie, maybe it's not so easy to remember what your favorite was. And if the topic is so much wide open, it could be difficult. But if it was, I give you this clue around, take or science, and your all-time favorite. You may have more than one, but just give me one. And that will be the warm-up question for the day. Your all-time favorite movie that is take-inspired. For the benefit of those who have just joined and they don't know what we are writing, I'm going to write that question, and you can keep on telling me what your favorite movie is. I'm going to type it. What is your all-time favorite movie that is take or science themed? My language could be better, but you know what I mean. So you will see this question, and when I get the chance later, when we are done, I'll get to do my chat analytics and tell you. I'm going to set up for myself now a long list, because I am sure there will be some repetitions, but there will be some things that are going to be not 3 or 4 things like we had last time. So it's going to take a while to compile them, but it'll be fun to see what your favorite is. Okay, we're going to start talking about R Markdown today. And I'm going to tell you that this is an important thing that you need to have, but something that probably would come late because it is about communication. But I want to spend the time now because it is related to what you want to do, and I can do this in a lecture, and then you can start using it. But before we get started, just like every time, there is always something that is left over from last time, or a few announcements, if you like. And so I'm going to begin with those. R Markdown is what you should have in your head. To some of you, it is new. To some of you, it may not be. But before we get there, a few things. First, I will be doing this posting of the slides or whatever it is for the lecture on Blackboard, and I have done that for today's discussion. And this slide is different. It is not the slide that you used to see with my lab logo and things like that. This one is produced by R Markdown. So I've got 2 purposes. I just want to demonstrate it, but I also want to show you what the PDF would come out of it. And therefore, if you go to the place, you don't have to go now, but if you want to follow along, if you go to the place in Blackboard where I put the lecture material, you go to today's day, you will find September 4th, 2 files. One is a file called .rmd, which is the source file for this, and the other one is the PDF. If your goal today is to follow along with the discussions, maybe the PDF is what you want to open. but you want to also look at the R Markdown, and I'm going to occasionally stop sharing this and then show you actually what the Markdown file there looks like. So I walk you through things and things like that. So it is there. That's part of it. What we did on Wednesday was talk about our graphics, and we did come a long way, but we didn't finish. And so the ones that are on that slide that we did not get time to finish, I'm not going to spend time talking about them now. So I will rely on you to go review on those and do on your own. I'm talking about bullet number 2 now, and you may hate me by talking a point that is the second instead of talking about the first, but that's okay. So those were the slides that were left over from last time that I would like you to go through on your own. The first point is about the tutorial that happened yesterday that Helen ran, and I heard it went well. Many of you may not have had the chance to follow it, but that was dedicated on our graphics, and there are so many topics that come in it. That one, the recording of it is available on Blackboard. Just like the lectures, the recordings are available in a place called Zoom. So Blackboard, you know, I switched over to Blackboard after I have not been able to do what I were usually doing. So it's not something that I like navigating through. So I will repeat where they are located. And this probably will be the last time I will tell you. Every time the recording of a lecture is concerned, you go to the Zoom tab and then you go to the date and things like that. So in that place, you will find the recording of yesterday's Helen's tutorial on our graphics. But we also have posted the PDF, which is what the exercises were and the solutions for them and things like that. Those are posted under tutorial, the course content, and so you'd find the file there. What you see there is a PDF. Now, because that one is an excellent explanation or demonstration for what R Markdown would do. So Helen did that PDF, is produced using R Markdown. And so that is going to be related to what we will talk about today. So there you will find the PDF file, which you see what the exercises were, the solutions for them, and so on. And if you wanted to follow her explanations on how things were, you can watch the recording. The recording, I can tell you, for those who have attended, they would get a chance to work on things, and so she would give them time and so on. So it may take you time to go through it, but it is good to get a chance to actually be doing that. And remember, there are resources I told you, wherever they exist. And so make sure that you are ready this week. And this is the time when you will get help from me, at least, in terms of having materials and things like that that's dedicated. We'll jump into the course and have things to do for the rest of the semester. Bullet number 3, assignment 2 is out. Congratulations, everyone, for having taken assignment 1 out of your way. You were all on time, no single student who had any trouble meeting it. So I'm proud of you. You did a good job. That one was on the thing we discussed on week 1. It has got a different flavor, but you have got knocked 1 out of your 5 things to do in terms of assignments. Assignment 2 is out, and it is out today, and it is on Blackboard. And it is going to be on R, which is what we did this week, and exploratory data analysis. I'm going to stop sharing this and come back to that assignment maybe for a second, just to show you. I sometimes do not like to switch over from one thing sharing to another because it takes a little bit of time, but it maybe is enough if I tell you what they are. Like the assignment has got 2 exercises. The 2 exercises are related with data sets that are real. And so you will find a discussion of them, a good description of what they are and what you're supposed to do with them. It's due a week from today, midnight, Friday. And unlike the assignment 1, this one would take you time. Both of them take you time. There is no assignment which doesn't take your time. But I would like you to plan ahead your time and use it well and things like that. So it is out is probably enough. If I get time towards the end, I will walk you through. It's posted on Blackboard, and it should be clear. And we've spent quite some time, Helen and myself, walking through and making sure that things are clear and things like that. So I don't want you to be wondering about what is being asked. It will be more fun to know what you want to do and explore things. Exploratory data analysis and R is the subject of assignment 2, 2 exercises that have got sub-points to them, and that should give you a good chance to play around with things. All right, those were my announcements for the day, and I'm going to go move ahead with this. Anybody has got any question? I'm going to try to find 5-10 minutes towards the end if I can get to break you out into rooms so that at least you meet sometimes with one another. It kind of, there was one time I did, but all the time we have more things to discuss. So I'll try to find some time towards the end today to do that. But if there is anybody who's got any question, you can go ahead and ask now. Unmute yourselves and ask. Anybody has got any questions for me?
I just have one.
Sure.
It's like spending 1 week in R is helping us a lot
Yes.
to revisit and all those stuff. As you said in last week, if you have any plan to spend another week on Python, that might help many of us too.
Okay, so that's an excellent point. I do not have the luxury of spending an entire week on Python, but what I will do, and this is something we have done in the past, is coordinate with Helen and have one tutorial session, a condensed tutorial session on Python. And every now and then, I will give a chance for people to work with Python. Later in the course, you would have more Python heavy things. In fact, one of the things I will do today is tell you about your need as graduate students, undergraduate students, people wanting to go to industry, being familiar with both of them and to a degree be comfortable, especially when they have to work together. And I will talk about that a little bit later today. So that's an excellent question, Mahdi, but I will not have a chance to have an entire week. There will be a tutorial, and you will get a chance to work with Python in the exercises. By the way, I should have mentioned assignment 2 is expected to be done in R, and it is, you will see when you read it, but it also says if you want to do it in Python, you are welcome to do it. And then every now and then it says, if you want to do it in Python, this is the way to go about it. So if I open it, I will show you that. So already in assignment 2, you get a chance to work with Python a little bit. So the short answer is we will do a tutorial, not a class discussion, but a tutorial on Python next week. Next week is probably the right thing to say. All right. Let me go ahead, if I will assume that we are all good now. So what is R Markdown? This is a way to produce reports. When you have probably already noticed in your own activities, there is time when you want to share what you did with others. There is a time when you would like to generate reports. There is time, many times actually, when you want to do things in an interactive way. So your code, those of you who have been doing coding for a long time would know that, it doesn't necessarily mean you've got all your ideas clearly set out for you and you write it. In a way, sometimes you may write something, you see a result, and then you modify your code accordingly and so on. This becomes even more the case when you're working with data, because some of the things has to do with exploring the data itself, seeing what it has to show you, and you try different things around it. So there is a very compelling reason for having to come up with a way to document something like this. R Markdown is a tool for doing that. Communicating to decision makers, if you want to generate report, write code and text in a single document so that the code would be interpreted as a code and generate results, and the comment is a comment or whatever you want, or the text is a text, and eventually to get a document. So R Markdown is a tool for doing this, and it is designed so that you would be able to generate formats of different kinds: PDF, Word files, slideshows, and many more. This one that I'm showing you now is PDF. It's a Beamer PDF slide type thing generated with an R Markdown, and you can see how the nice layout it would become. If I had chosen some other thing, it would have produced a PDF that you looked like what Helen generates for these tutorials that you saw. This discussion that I'm having now is based on a chapter in a book that I said is a good reference when it comes to R, and it's called R for Data Science. It's linked from the course's website, and I have a link to this particular chapter here. And just for a second, I'm going to go there so that you know where to read. We are coming now to a long weekend, and I hope that you will get time to rest and relax and things like that. But it is also a time to catch up if you have been lagging behind. So this will be a good reading to follow up this lecture when it is finished. So if everything works fine and my screen sharing is not going to cause a problem, I'm going to go there just to show you what that chapter looks like. So I'm going to stop sharing this for a second and go and share something else, which is what that chapter would be like, to show you where it is located. Okay. I hope can somebody tell me now? I'm not even sure that I can see my text, but do you see a chapter that says 27 Markdown or something like that? R Markdown file?
No.
No? What do you see?
Nothing.
Nothing. Okay, that's not very helpful. Okay, I'm going to do this back to where I was. I'm going to do this. I'm going to go back to where I was and see if this one would help me to share now. This instead. Didn't succeed the way I wanted. I'm going to stop this. Go to I'm going to come back to my slide. I had issues before. So I'm going to go back. So this is a chapter. You can go to that book and you see a discussion that is more like in text. And so you'd see examples around it as you go along. And that's probably all the point I wanted to make on this one. All right. So how does it work? What does it do? First, the way to install it is to write this line that says install packages, and R Markdown is a name. And this will make you have access to it, and you don't need to load it as a library. And once you have successfully installed it into or install as a package like this in your R code, then you get some facilities to work with it. Because I was not able to share the screen, I wanted to share from a browser. I'm going to maybe skip this portion that I'm talking about now. Can I see? I'm back on my old PDF slide that we were seeing, right? Can somebody say just yes?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. So the other thing I have posted on Blackboard is something that's called a cheat sheet. And this is R Studio's summary whenever there is something big, something that you would want to learn around different R features. Sometimes it's about libraries, for example, something that we would see when we start talking about dplyr and data wrangling. R Markdown itself has got some very interesting features. And so there is a cheat sheet that goes along with this one. And so the latest version that RStudio has is posted under resources. So if you go to the places where it says resources, I had a document that says R. This time I have something that's called cheat sheet that describes how R Markdown works. And so I would, again, don't want to get into the trouble of having to share the right slides, the right screen and so on. But there is a document that you would find useful. So I encourage you to look at it. And you will find that useful for other things too. So how does it work? You write a piece of code in a text file that has got a special extension. And if you're following along on the one that is posted for this lecture now, there is a file called .rmd that has got the content for this. And it will be a file that you have an option to edit for. And so it would contain things that are code, things that are texts. And so to produce something like this, there are certain rules that you would need to learn. The things that are associated with text is similar to those of you who are familiar with LaTeX, how you would encode things so that when you compile it in a PDF form, a bold gets text a bold, an italic gets encoded in a certain way. And so you get an italic, you've got a way to have sections and things like that. That's about text. And whenever you have a code, you have to tell R that this is a piece of code. And so you indicate that by having this triple line things that you would start. The beginning of the document is an optional one, and this is yet another markup language header type that starts with this specific symbol ---- and then the rest of the things that you would have in it will be a combination of code and things that would associate how you would want to do things. So now you don't see the text I have used for producing this, but let me see if I can continue like this without having to go back to my R Markdown actual text where you can see. But let me go with these slides for the purpose of having to avoid interruptions. So the optional header file, the yet another markup language type, would give you an option to write things that are metadata. For example, here is the heading, the title for a particular thing that this example shows you. You can give a date, an author name, and then you can give a couple of options in which how this will be produced as a document. The one that I have generated, it started off with saying the title R Markdown, and then there was a date. I didn't have a name for an author. That is what I put in the header file for this. R Markdown was my title, and the date was September 4th. And then I chose to produce a Beamer slide PDF. The PDF document was what I chose to show, and that's how this one is generated. But you can produce some other thing, like Word, for example. Your assignment 2 actually asks you to produce your solution using R Markdown, and by the time you finish this, and by the time you go through this yourself, you should be able to get that one. So whenever there is a code chunk in your R Markdown file, you will be able to either produce results out of it and include in your documents, or just have it in the form of a code and not run it. There is, in R Markdown, when you have the file opened, a way for you to run the code, so you generate something. And the run the code part is something that looks like a play button with an arrow, or you can use a command like what I have written here to run that piece of code. So for example, if I had a piece of code that says like this, ggplot, by now you have seen, if you have followed the tutorial yesterday, or if you are planning to go through the slides left over from last time, ggplot is one library for doing plot graphics in R, and dplyr, you don't know it now, but it is a library. And so you've got something like this, and now this piece of code can be generated, and you can produce results. This one, I think, will be meaningful only if I show you the R Markdown file itself. Let me ask for your patience, and you will tell me if things would not work this time. I will try, not the browser, but I want to show the R Markdown file itself so that you can see this, and then I'll come back to this one again. Okay, let me stop sharing this, and then I'm going to try share this instead. Okay, I hope now, yes, now I know that you're seeing what I see. Okay, this is great. So this is the R Markdown. I have opened it, and by now you're probably familiar with having to see when you have an R Studio for panels like this. You can have them all up, or you can have one of them enlarged like what I'm going to do now, and the other one suppressed. And so what I have shown you so far is a document that generated it, and it is how this one is written. For example, I had written, the introductory material about, a few things that I forgot, and or I wanted to talk about as announcements, is written as a text here. So when this document is generated as a PDF, it would just become a section on its own. I'm going to come back to that PDF to show you how these section headings become, but you can see it now. So I have used a symbol. That symbol was a hashtag, and that enabled R Markdown to know that whatever is this one is going to be a section heading. So if I'm going to generate a slide show like what I showed you, it becomes a heading for the slide. If I'm generating a report, then it becomes a section heading. And whatever is coming here, it will be the content of the slide or the section. And there you have text that's written with this special symbol. Whenever I have an asterisk here in front of it, it means a bullet point. And if I have something indented in it, it becomes a sub-bullet under it. So that's what you saw. So what I have shown you in the introduction and the chart I have had is all under this introduction, and you see how things are coming. And then you've got the yet another markup language header I told you. You can see it here. And then the piece of code. And the piece of code looks like this. And the button, which is the reason why I came here now to show you, is this, which you can either run like by pressing it, and you get a result like you produced, or you write a piece of code that, or remember a key combination to generate this result as you see. So you can see now this document is having the code and results generated out of it. And so the text portion, which is where we have stopped, it will show you how to write a piece of text, a word in italic. And the way to write in italic would be to have the word italic and have it embraced within 2 brackets, and that would give you a text that's italic. And if you have something to bold, then you have 2 asterisks before it, and then you've got the word bold. And so you learn what these are. They are not going to be too many. In fact, this particular document would show you things that you would need for most of the time. Because I have told you, a section heading comes with the hashtag symbol. You may wonder what you would do if you wanted a subsection, right? If you had a section and you want something under it, then you make 2 of them. If you want a third one, then you make 3 of them, and it goes on that way. When you have lists, you have the asterisk that I told you that would be a bullet, and to have things under it will be to indent it. By indenting this, then you are telling R Markdown to generate in this fashion. So it goes on this way. You have a combination of text and code, some of which you want to run and produce results right there, or some of which you want to do later on. Okay, now I have been able to switch over from one thing to another. So let me stop this one and then go back to the way I was sharing the PDF one. I guess that will be faster for what we want to do next. So I'm going to go here, share this one, and this is where we were. So the italic I showed you that was put between 2 asterisks shows up this way. The bold shows up this way. The code shows up this way. And the subscript part where I had, the symbol that you would do in LaTeX to do, or an underscore would give you a subscript in this fashion. So you can do text. Similarly, you could have section headings first, subheading under it, a third, a fourth, and it goes on like this. List, what you saw there written, comes out in a fashion like this. You've got a bullet list item 1, and then under item 2, for example, you've got sub-bullets. You have a way to either keep them as bullets or you can number them, and you've got both of them demonstrated in that code example I showed you. You can embed code that is in a URL. Here is one example. The thing that I did not succeed to get to the browser, I wanted to share you the chapter 27 book, for example, has got a URL embedded within the code. You could also embed things that are images, that just like you would do in LaTeX. So what this one has enabled is producing a document of your choice by having to decide how you are going to as it is called, knitting. There is a button at the top in the menu that I showed you before, where you can say you want to knit this document to generate the report. The interactive portion is by having that play button or the key combinations to run your code. But if you wanted to run the entire thing and produce a document, that process is called knitting. And knit, K-N-I-T, like you would knit a sweater, and it has got an R in it. When you work with a report like this, one of the things you would want to do is be able to create tables, for example. And those of you who speak LaTeX would know that this is a very painful thing to do, to remember how you create, especially when you want to have some nice formats around it. The way you create tables in R Markdown is very convenient. And when you look at the code for this one, you would see what it means. There is bars that you would put in, but the rows and columns are basically generated in a way that you would have done if you were to manually write down things. Like if you were talking to me now and you want to show it on a keyboard and you want to, display in a text version what a table would look like, you'll write something on the rows, you'll write something on the columns, and you will separate them with some kind of things that we can agree on, maybe a bar or something like that. That is essentially how you would produce tables. And so you get something nice generated in automatically by R Markdown. So table creation is easy. Sometimes you want to have equations. Well, not sometimes, very many times you want to have equations as part of your report that you are generating, and there are doing it. You can do things like summation, you can subscripts and things like that. What you see here is the result. How this came about, you find it in the R Markdown file that you have seen that I was walking through, but because I can't just juggle between these two things so very quickly, I'm going to skip and let you see the R Markdown file for yourself. Some of you might actually be looking at the R Markdown file as I go through this one on your computers. And I see some of you are loading, so maybe you are able to do that. So I'm going to trust that you are going to be able to do that. One thing that I probably would want to tell you while this one is displayed is the reason you want to have an R Markdown file. For example, for your assignment 2 is because you want to generate reports so you can give me and Helen and you submit something. And so we will see what you did. We see the code you wrote. We see the result you generated. So a report is complete report is generated. Sometimes if you were to, in working in industry for decision makers and so on, they may not be interested in your code. They're interested just in the result. And so you can suppress the code and then just have the result. Sometimes you are collaborating with another colleague, a data scientist like yourself, or you can think of yourself for the future. And so you wanted to have this documented for yourself. So then you have a need for having the code and the result in the report you generate. These options are turned off with echo and things like that, that you will see described in the code portion of this one, or if you got to that chapter 27, then you would know what to do. How much you want to display, whether the entire code or the report, or a combination of those things. So let me, on that point of generating a report, you will do R Markdown. The book I told you, where I said chapter 27 discusses R Markdown, is entirely available online. Not just that chapter, but the whole book. And we'll come back and use some of those chapters for discussions later in the semester. The book has a printout version, and it's sold just like everybody else, but it is freely available online. If you read the preface of it, the author says the entire book production, including the thing that you see on HTML, the browser, the book version, the PDF, and so on, are done in R Markdown. That should give you an idea. So the entire book is produced using R Markdown. It is written that way. And so you've got this flexibility of being able to generate things that would be for browser, things that would be for print, and things for versions of things that would come within PDF itself, right? Because some of the things would be for a device, for example, if you have a device that would be useful. So its portability is important. And there is a little bit of a discussion in the beginning of the chapter that tells you how this comes about. Those of you who are in computer science would really appreciate actually knowing about that, because there is different steps, and Pandoc is what is used to have an intermediate representation of what's written here, so that it would generate different kinds of outputs suitable for different kinds of platforms, different kinds of communication media. So that is why the chapter is delayed in the book to talk about communication. So you can write an entire book, not just your reports for your assignment 2, but you can write your thesis. Consider that, some of you. You can write a book, and you can have a lot of easy things that you could get. I don't use R Markdown for my day-to-day research papers or things like. I don't, because that's not the kind of thing I usually do. I write in LaTeX. But one thing I can admit is, suppose you had a need for having to prepare a talk, prepare a paper, and prepare something for your colleague. You can do this in one single R Markdown file, and by just changing how you are outputting it, you get different things. I think that's an awesome thing, if you spend the time to actually do something like that useful, especially if what you do is data related, right? So otherwise it won't make sense. If I write a piece of code that is to run on high performance computing and it's a C++ code, I'm not going to do R Markdown for it because it probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But if it has got to do a lot with data and you've got a need for having to show many things around the data and things that we would explore, consider that. And I wanted to mention that this entire book was written in R Markdown, the book I mentioned. All right, I'm coming here and I don't know why I don't get the chance to move forward. Okay, maybe this is the last page. That's probably why I'm saying. Okay, I think this was hopefully, although it was a quick one, a good walkthrough through R Markdown, and you've got the rest of the material there. Let me come back now and stop sharing and see if there is anybody who's got any quick questions for me. I'm going to try to share some other things so that you can see on R Python relationship. That was the question Mahdi, if I remember the name right, asked me. You would want to be able to do both. Jupyter is the closest language I can, or tool I can think of when you would do something similar to what I just told you. And RStudio has done a little bit of work now to kind of combine what R does with what Python does in a new tool. So if I am successful to share that, we can watch a video that RStudio has. If not, then I'll share it in the chat session so that you can watch it on your desktop. But before I do that, let me see if there is anybody who's got any question for me.
Professor, I just have a quick question.
Sure.
So do you, Professor, do you think that in our Markdown report and the LaTeX report, is there any difference in formatting, like sections, subsections? Are these exactly same or somehow they are different?
Between what
at
and
least
what?
in visual aspect.
Between what and what?
Between LaTeX document writing platform.
Oh, they are very different. They are very different. And so you would, the idea of how to think about sections and so on, if you do LaTeX, would help you learn this quickly, but their syntax and everything else is very different. There is a little bit of similarity in how equations are expressed. For example, a subscript and a superscript with a hat and underscore, those type of things are similar. So if you know LaTeX, you would spend half an hour, you would very quickly pick. By just finishing what we just talked today and reading that chapter, you can go very far with R Markdown.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, let me try to take you to that place. And one thing I have seen in other Zoom meetings I have had is if we are going to watch a video together, and this is 5 minutes video, then whatever I see here is not necessarily what you see on your end. So let me make sure that this one would work. Otherwise, we will just see things on our own devices. Okay, so this is what I have done now. I have shared a link to an RStudio. RStudio is the company that does R, and so most of their things are free, as you know. And should I ask, can I assume everybody has got R successfully installed on their computers? Is there anybody? Because most of the answer is yes, I don't expect you to say. Is there anybody who hasn't? Okay, so now you know. So the RStudio version is the one I would encourage you to work with. And so go watch this. This is what they have on their front page now. And I'm going to be watching it as you do. And we will avoid having to worry about if the audio is right and if everybody is seeing this one. This one talks about R and Python. And I want to stress again that you will be in a better position if you know both of them. And RStudio has gone to the extent of having to, they call it a love story between R and Python, to make people work with the two languages together and have to made a tool that would enable them to interoperate. And this is a very, very recent thing that they have done. That's what they have it up on their webpage now. And I wish this one was, available some time back, because people are in some ways into different camps. And there are things that R is very good for, and there are things that Python is good for. And so to be able to do them together and to be able to have a platform where you can scale them and have an interactive way to generate things like what Jupyter would do, what R Markdown would do, is a big advancement. Okay, so some of you may still be watching, but I want us to stop here, and those who have maybe if everybody stops, that would be great help. And we've got about 5 minutes. I don't think it would make a whole lot of sense to break out into rooms, but we could use this one for discussions if you have any questions. And if not, then I can also walk through the second assignment, but I think it probably will be not necessary. So let me see if anybody has got any questions or comments. So everything was clear and fine. All right, next week is going to be a short week. We have Monday off, it's Labor Day, and so we'll have Wednesday and Friday. And the topic for next week is exploratory data analysis and the data science process. And so we will be spending Wednesday and Friday for doing that. One other thing I want to tell you is, now that I have your surveys and your first assignment that tells me a little bit about you, would help me decide, if not anything else, about order of topics. There are some places where I want to emphasize more, places where I want to do less. But one thing that I have been contemplating, and probably I will do, is bring the data visualization discussion from being very late in the semester, maybe a little bit forward. And that has been something that I gathered from what you said and from those of you who I have interacted with. So that may happen, and that would give us a chance for having the machine learning portions continuous in a way, and that will be one thing I'm considering. The other thing I'm considering is bring up the discussion about semester project and proposal ideas a little bit earlier. Not very much, but a little bit earlier. And so both of those things are a result of how you have been communicating with me, and I think you will be to your advantage in many ways. Those of you who have not used my office hour, of course, you're always welcome. And even if you just want to introduce yourself and chat, that will be a great reason to show up. And if there is something that makes that time not work for you, you should feel free to reach out and see if I can arrange another time for having to meet with you. So next week, as office hours, Helen's and mine, you can use them for assignment 2 if you need them. But get started early and do a good job on that one. So think of it as having to demonstrate your R abilities through this one. And those who are Python speakers, I still want you to try to attempt this one through R so that you add one more thing to your bag. So I want to encourage you to do that, even though you are allowed to do the homework in Python. All right, if there is no question, I'm going to dismiss you. We've got 5 seconds left. Any last minute question for me? Going once, going twice, going 3 times. No questions. All right. Have a great weekend and a long weekend, and good luck with your assignment 2, and catch up and read on the portion that follows up with R Markdown on that book that I told you. All right. Take care and stay safe. All right. Bye-bye.